Have you ever noticed how the wealthy look right through people like me? How they'll hand over their credit cards without making eye contact, bark orders while scrolling through their phones, or discuss million-dollar deals as if I'm just another piece of furniture in the room. One drop of water was all it took to change everything. One tiny splash that made a billionaire show his true colors and force me to finally show mine. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to my channel. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. And if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, what are you waiting for? Trust me, you don't want to miss what I'm about to share. My name is Sarah Chen, and for 8 months, I perfected the art of invisibility at the Golden Terrace, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant where a single meal costs more than most people's monthly rent. I wore the standard black uniform, kept my hair pulled back in a tight bun, and mastered the delicate dance of being present without being noticed. That's what they paid me for, to serve without being remembered, to anticipate needs without drawing attention. What they didn't pay me for was my law degree, my nursing degree, or my fluency in 5 languages. Why would they? To them, I was just another replaceable server, another nameless face in a sea of black uniforms moving silently between tables of power brokers and titans of industry. But here's the truth I kept hidden: I wasn't always invisible. I used to be somebody. I used to matter. I used to believe I could change the world with my voice and my knowledge. Until I didn't. The restaurant hummed with quiet energy that night, crystal glasses catching the light from the chandeliers, silverware clinking against fine china, hushed conversations floating through the air scented with truffle oil and aged wine. I moved through it all like a ghost, refilling water glasses, clearing plates, smiling politely when addressed directly. I had perfected my performance as a nobody. Then he walked in. Victor Reynolds. The atmosphere shifted immediately, a collective intake of breath, a ripple of whispers, heads turning subtly. Our manager's face went pale as he rushed forward, his usual composure cracking just enough for those of us who knew him to notice. Earlier that day, he'd warned us someone important was coming, someone who demanded absolute perfection. Now I understood why. Victor Reynolds stood 6'2" with silver-streaked black hair and the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you could buy and sell everyone in the room. His custom-tailored suit probably cost more than my annual salary. The Patek Philippe watch on his wrist could have paid off my student loans. The 3 people with him, 2 men in expensive suits and a woman dripping in diamonds, laughed too loudly at whatever he was saying. I felt a chill run down my spine. Something about him made my stomach tighten, the way his eyes dismissed our manager, the nervous energy of his companions, the casual arrogance in his stance. Every instinct told me to stay away from that table. For an hour, I did exactly that. I served the quiet couples in the corners, the business associates speaking in hushed tones, the elderly pair celebrating their anniversary. I remained invisible, safe in my carefully constructed anonymity. Until James, one of the senior servers, rushed up to me, his face pale, his hands trembling slightly. "Sarah," he whispered urgently. "I need you to cover Reynolds' table for me. Just for a few minutes. I spilled wine on my shirt, I need to change." My heart dropped. "James, I can't. Please," he begged. "It's just water refills. Don't talk to him. Don't even look at him. In and out." Before I could protest further, he disappeared toward the staff room, leaving me frozen in place. I stared across the dining room at that center table where Victor Reynolds sat laughing, completely unaware that in less than 5 minutes, his entire world would come crashing down, and it would begin with a single drop of water. Have you ever felt that strange sensation, that quiet voice inside warning you that everything is about to change? As I picked up that crystal water pitcher and started walking toward his table, I felt it deep in my bones. Something significant was about to happen. And I was right. What I didn't know was that after 8 months of hiding, of making myself small, of burying my voice, I was about to discover just how powerful that voice could be. Every step toward Victor Reynolds' table felt like walking toward my own execution. The crystal water pitcher was cool against my palm, my knuckles white from gripping it too tightly. 8 months of hiding, of burying who I really was, and now I was about to serve a man who embodied everything I once fought against. You're probably wondering how a woman with 2 advanced degrees ends up refilling water glasses at a high-end restaurant. The truth is both simple and complicated: I was running. From my past, from my failures, from myself. 3 years ago, I was Sarah Chen, rising star at Morrison & Associates, specializing in corporate fraud cases. I wore designer suits instead of a server's uniform, argued in boardrooms instead of taking orders, and believed passionately in justice. My mother, an immigrant from Taipei who cleaned hotel rooms for 20 years to put me through school, would beam with pride when she told her friends about her daughter, the lawyer. Sarah fights for people who can't fight for themselves, she'd say. And I did, until the Westlake Pharmaceuticals case. I discovered evidence that their newest FDA-approved drug had falsified safety data, that people were dying from side effects the company knew about and buried. I built an airtight case with a whistleblower's help, ready to bring down a billion-dollar company and save countless lives. Then I learned how power really works. The night before we were set to file, my senior partner called me into his office. "We're dropping the case," he said, not even looking up from his computer. "What? Why?" "We have everything we need. The firm has decided to represent Westlake instead. More profitable long-term relationship. But people are dying." He finally looked at me, his eyes cold. "That's not our problem anymore." The whistleblower, a lab technician named Meyer who risked everything to expose the truth, was found dead 3 days later. Suicide, they called it. I knew better. I quit the next day. Used my nursing degree to work at a community clinic in the Bronx for a while, until I burned out from the endless parade of suffering I couldn't fix. Then I disappeared, became invisible, right when the Golden Terrace was hiring. For 8 months, no one knew who I really was. Not James, with his theater degree and dreams of Broadway, not Lucia, our hostess who supported 3 kids on her own, not even Mr. Harrington, our manager, who ran the restaurant with military precision but always made sure staff had a hot meal during shifts. "You look like you're walking to your own funeral," James whispered as he passed me on his way to change his shirt. "Just water refills, Sarah. You'll be fine." Reynolds was in the middle of what sounded like a business pitch, gesturing emphatically with manicured hands. "We're talking guaranteed returns of 30% minimum. The Shanghai property alone will double your investment in 18 months. The 2 men nodded, entranced. The woman, elegant in a way that spoke of old money rather than new, watched Reynolds with a calculating look that caught my attention. Elena Blackwood, I realized with a start. Heiress to the Blackwood media empire. What was she doing with Reynolds? I approached from the side, moving silently, as downcast as I'd trained myself to be. I reached for the water glass in front of the older investor first, pouring carefully, then moved to the second man's glass. When I reached for Reynolds' glass, he shifted in his chair suddenly, leaning back to emphasize something about market exclusivity. His elbow shot out and knocked against my arm. Time slowed. The pitcher tilted slightly. 3 drops of water, no more, splashed onto the sleeve of his custom suit. The table fell silent. Reynolds looked down at his sleeve, then slowly up at me. His expression wasn't anger, not yet. It was something worse. It was the look of someone who'd just noticed an insect they needed to crush. "Are you kidding me right now?" His voice was soft, dangerous. "I'm so sorry, sir," I said quickly, my throat tight. "It was an accident." "Let me get. Do you have any idea how much this suit costs?" His voice rose, slicing through the restaurant's ambient noise like a knife. I kept my eyes down. "I sincerely apologize, sir. I'll get something to clean it immediately." "A cleaning cloth." Reynolds laughed, but there was no humor in it. "This is a bespoke Tom Ford. $15,000. And you just dumped water on it because you can't even hold a pitcher steady." My face burned with humiliation. I could feel every eye in the restaurant on me, or the staff, the other diners, Mr. Harrington rushing over, his face a mask of panic. "Look at you," Reynolds continued, his voice dripping with contempt. "You probably dropped out of school, didn't you? Couldn't cut it in the real world, so now you're here, carrying plates and spilling drinks on people who actually matter." Something twisted in my chest, a familiar pain. The pain of being made to feel worthless. The pain I'd felt when I realized the system I believed in was broken beyond repair. But Reynolds wasn't finished. He was enjoying this. "You know what the problem is with people like you. He gestured at me like I was an object. You don't understand your place. There are people in this world who build things, who create value, who make billions and change industries. And then there are people like you, the ones who serve us, the ones who are completely replaceable. One of his guests shifted uncomfortably. Elena Blackwood looked away, her jaw tightening, but Reynolds didn't care. He leaned forward, his eyes locked on mine. I could have you fired with a snap of my fingers, he said. One word to the owner and you're done. You'll be out begging for another minimum wage job that you'll probably lose because you can't even do something as simple as pour water. Each word hit like a physical blow, landing exactly where it was meant to hurt. For 8 months, I had stayed quiet. For 8 months, I had swallowed my pride, my intelligence, my voice. I had made myself small because it felt safer. But something inside me was cracking, a dam breaking after holding back too much for too long. All the anger, all the frustration, all the times I'd stayed silent when I should have spoken up, it all came rushing to the surface at once. I lifted my head. For the first time in 8 months, I looked someone directly in the eyes without fear. And what Victor Reynolds saw in my face made him pause. It wasn't submission. It wasn't shame. It was rage, cold, clear, and focused. The kind of rage that changes things. I set the water pitcher down on the table slowly, deliberately. Then I straightened my shoulders, lifted my chin, and did something I hadn't done in a very long time. I spoke. You asked if I dropped out of school, I said, my voice clear and steady. I didn't. I have 2 university degrees. One in law, one in nursing. Reynolds blinked. His mouth opened slightly. I speak 5 languages fluently, I continued. English, Mandarin, French, Spanish, and German, which, judging by the way you've been mispronouncing words all evening, is about for more than you can manage. The guests at the table stared at me in shock. Elena Blackwood's hand flew to her mouth. The older investor leaned forward, suddenly very interested. And Victor Reynolds' face began to turn red. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Because I was about to tell him something that would destroy everything he'd built. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been made to feel small or invisible, stay with me. Because what happened next changed not just my life, but the lives of countless others. And it all began the moment I decided to stop hiding and start speaking the truth. You know what's funny about powerful people? They think their secrets are safe. They think that because they have money, because they have influence, because they have armies of lawyers, nobody will ever dare expose them. They think they're untouchable. Victor Reynolds was about to learn how wrong he was. I took a step closer to the table. My heart was racing, but my voice remained calm, steady, strong. Mr. Reynolds, I said, looking directly at him. Since you've decided to humiliate me in front of everyone here, let me return the favor. Let me tell your new friends exactly who they're about to do business with. Reynolds' face went from red to pale in an instant. Excuse me. I turned to the 2 men at the table. They were sitting up straighter now, their expensive suits suddenly looking uncomfortable. These were investors. New investors. People Reynolds needed to impress. People he needed to trust him. Gentlemen, I said, my voice professional now, like I was back in a courtroom. Before you sign anything with Mr. Reynolds, you should know that his real estate empire he's been bragging about. It's built on lies, blackmail, and ruined lives. That's enough. Reynolds shouted, starting to stand. Sit down, I said sharply, and to my surprise, he did. Maybe it was the shock. Maybe it was the authority in my voice. Or maybe it was the fear of what I might say next. I turned back to the investors. 6 months ago, I worked for a law firm that represented one of Mr. Reynolds' former business partners, a man named Robert Jong. Reynolds convinced Jong to invest $12 million into a property development project. Promised him returns of 40%. Showed him falsified documents, fake contracts, manufactured projections. The investors were leaning forward now, hanging on every word. When Jong discovered the fraud and threatened to go to authorities, Reynolds had his lawyers threaten Jong's family. They dug up a medical issue Jong's daughter had. Threatened to leak it to the press. Threatened to ruin Jong's reputation. Jong was forced to walk away, losing everything. His marriage fell apart. His daughter had to drop out of college. Last I heard, he was working 2 jobs just to survive. Reynolds' face was bright red again. These are lies. She's making this up. Am I? I turned to him, my voice cold. Jong versus Reynolds Enterprises. Case number 2847B. Settled out of court 8 months ago. Non-disclosure agreement signed, which is why nobody knows about it. One of the investors pulled out his phone, already typing. But Jong wasn't the only one, was he, Mr. Reynolds? There was Patricia Rodriguez, a single mother who invested her life savings into your Miami project. When that project collapsed, you blamed her for inadequate due diligence. You kept every penny while she lost her home. How do you, Reynolds started? How do I know? Because I reviewed that case, too. Rodriguez versus Reynolds Properties. Another settlement. Another silenced victim. Another family destroyed while you walked away richer. Elena Blackwood was staring at Reynolds now, her face a mixture of disgust and shock. I switched to Mandarin, addressing one of the investors directly. My voice was respectful but firm. 25%, 40%. 12%. The investor's face went rigid. He understood every word. I switched to German, addressing the other investor. Und die Berliner Entwicklung, die und von der sagt, SIE vom Stadtrat genehmigt. SIE ist es nicht. SIE steckt wegen Verstassen gegen die Zoneneinteilung im Ausschuss fest. Lugt SIE sieht 3 Monaten und hofft, Geld zu bekommen, bever SIE die Wahrheit entdecken. The second investor's jaw clenched. I turned back to Reynolds, switching to English. You see, Mr. Reynolds, you made a mistake. You assumed that someone in a waitress uniform couldn't possibly know anything, couldn't possibly be educated, couldn't possibly be smart enough to see through your schemes. Reynolds' hands were shaking now. Not from anger. From fear. But before I worked here, I continued, I was a lawyer specializing in corporate fraud. And before that, I was a nurse, which means I know how to investigate criminals, and I know how to identify people who are sick with greed. I pulled my phone from my apron pocket. I also know that 3 of your former investors filed complaints with the Securities Commission last month. Complaints that are currently under investigation. And I know that the documents they submitted included evidence of wire fraud, falsified tax returns, and illegal offshore accounts. Reynolds lunged forward. You can't prove any of that. I don't have to, I said calmly. Because they already have. The investigation is active. The subpoenas are being prepared. And within 6 months, everything you've built through lies and intimidation is going to come crashing down. The entire restaurant was silent now. Every guest, every waiter, every person in that room was frozen, watching this confrontation unfold. I leaned in close to Reynolds, my voice dropping to a whisper that only he and his table could hear. You called me replaceable. You called me uneducated. You treated me like I was nothing. But the truth is, I know exactly who you are. I know what you've done. And now, so do they. I straightened up and looked at the investors. Gentlemen, if you'd like the names of the lawyers handling the investigation, I'd be happy to provide them. I'm sure they'd love to hear about these new projects he's pitching to you. Both investors stood up simultaneously, their faces dark. One of them was already on his phone. The other was grabbing his briefcase. We're done here, one of them said to Reynolds, his voice icy. And just like that, Victor Reynolds' empire began to crumble right in front of him, because of a waitress he thought was nobody. The silence that followed was deafening. Victor Reynolds sat at that table frozen, his face white as paper. The investors were gathering their things, moving quickly, urgently. Elena Blackwood was staring at Reynolds like she'd never seen him before, like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. Our manager stood a few feet away, his mouth open in shock. The other guests in the restaurant were whispering, their phones out, probably already texting friends about what they'd just witnessed. And I just stood there, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. What had I just done? For 8 months, I'd been so careful, so quiet, so invisible. And in less than 10 minutes, I'd destroyed that carefully built wall. I'd exposed myself. I'd revealed who I really was. But more importantly, I'd exposed him. You? Reynolds' voice was shaking. You have no idea what you've just done. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel afraid. I know exactly what I've done. I've told the truth. That's something you wouldn't recognize. One of the investors paused before leaving. He was the older man, the one I'd spoken to in German. He turned to Reynolds, his face hard. My lawyers will be contacting you tomorrow. Consider our deal terminated, and expect a full audit of everything you've presented to us. The second investor didn't even bother to speak. He just shook his head in disgust and walked out. Elena Blackwood stood up slowly, carefully placing her napkin on her plate. She looked at me, and for a moment I saw something in her eyes, respect, perhaps, or recognition. Like she understood what it took to stand up to someone like Reynolds. Thank you, she said quietly to me. Then she turned to Reynolds. I came here tonight thinking I was meeting a successful businessman. Instead, I met a fraud. Don't ever contact me again. She walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor, leaving Reynolds alone at that big table in the center of the room. The table that was supposed to make him look important. Now it just made him look small, isolated, exposed. He stood up slowly, his hands clenched into fists. You're finished, he said to me, his voice low and venomous. I will destroy you. I will make sure you never work anywhere again. I will. You'll do nothing, a voice interrupted. We both turned. Mr. Harrington was stepping forward and, to my shock, he didn't look angry. He looked proud. Mr. Reynolds, the manager said firmly. I think it's time you left. Reynolds stared at him in disbelief. Do you know who I am? Do you know how much money I spend here? I know exactly who you are, Mr. Harrington replied. And after what I just heard, I know that your money isn't worth having. We don't serve criminals at the Golden Terrace. Please leave. Reynolds' face turned purple with rage. For a moment, I thought he might actually explode. But then he grabbed his jacket, shot me one last look of pure hatred, and stormed toward the exit. Just before he reached the door, he turned back. This isn't over, he spat. Yes, it is, I said calmly, because by tomorrow morning, every major news outlet is going to hear about what happened here tonight, and they're going to start asking questions. Good luck trying to silence all of them. Reynolds' face went pale again. Then he turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. The moment he was gone, the entire restaurant seemed to exhale. Conversation started up again. The tension that had gripped the room slowly released, but everyone was still looking at me, whispering, wondering. Mr. Harrington approached me, his expression unreadable. My office, he said quietly. Please. My stomach sank. This was it. I was fired. Of course I was fired. I'd just caused the biggest scene this restaurant had probably ever seen. I'd humiliated a billionaire customer. I'd revealed secrets that were supposed to stay buried. I followed the manager through the narrow hallway to his small office. He closed the door behind us and turned to face me. I prepared myself for the worst. But instead of yelling, he smiled. 20 years, he said, shaking his head. 20 years I've been in this business, and I have never seen anything like what you just did. I blinked, confused. I understand if you need to fire me. Fire you. He laughed. Sarah, you just saved 3 people from being scammed out of millions of dollars. You exposed a criminal. You stood up to someone who's been terrorizing people for years. Why on earth would I fire you? Because I made a scene. Because you did what was right, he interrupted gently. Listen, I've known about Victor Reynolds for a long time. I've heard the rumors. I've seen the way he treats people. But people like him, they're protected by their money. Nobody wants to stand up to them because they're scared. And then you, a young woman he tried to humiliate, you brought him to his knees using nothing but truth and intelligence. He sat down behind his desk, gesturing for me to sit as well. Sarah, you have 2 university degrees. You speak 5 languages. You clearly have a brilliant mind. What are you doing working as a waitress? I looked down at my hands. I was hiding. From what? From myself, I admitted quietly. From expectations. From people who wanted me to be something I wasn't sure I could be anymore. I made some mistakes in my previous career. I trusted the wrong people. I got hurt, and I needed to disappear for a while. Mr. Harrington nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. And now, he asked. I looked up at him. Now I think I'm done hiding. Good, he said with a smile. Because something tells me the world needs people like you. I walked out of the manager's office feeling like I was floating, or maybe drowning. I honestly couldn't tell the difference. My hands were still shaking. My heart was still racing. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching my life happen to someone else. The dinner service was winding down now. Guests were finishing their meals, paying their bills, getting ready to leave. But I could feel their eyes on me. Whispers followed me as I walked through the dining room. James, the waiter who'd asked me to cover Reynolds' table, rushed up to me near the kitchen. His face was a mixture of shock and awe. Sarah, what just happened out there? Everyone's talking about it. They're saying you destroyed Victor Reynolds. I just told the truth, I said simply. But how did you know all that stuff about the fraud, the investigations, I used to be a lawyer, I explained. Corporate fraud was my specialty. Reynolds' name came across my desk multiple times. I recognized him the moment he walked in. James stared at me like he'd never seen me before. You're a lawyer? Why are you working here? Because sometimes you need to step back from the world to figure out who you really are, I said. And sometimes it takes something like tonight to remind you. As I headed to the staff room to collect my things, I felt a light touch on my arm. I turned to find Elena Blackwood standing there, her expression thoughtful. Ms. Chen, she said. May I speak with you for a moment? I nodded, surprised. Of course. She guided me to a quiet corner near the bar, away from curious ears. What you did in there? She began, her voice soft but intense. That took incredible courage. I shook my head. It was stupid and impulsive. No, she said firmly. It was necessary. And long overdue. She paused, studying my face. I've been investigating Reynolds for months. I stared at her, stunned. What? I'm not just the Blackwood media heiress. I run our investigative journalism division. We've been building a story on Reynolds' fraud schemes, but we couldn't get anyone to go on the record. Everyone was too afraid. My mind raced, connecting dots. That's why you were at his table tonight. She nodded. I needed confirmation about the Shanghai project. What I didn't expect was to witness a complete takedown of one of the most untouchable men in the business world. Her eyes sparkled. By a waitress, no less. Former lawyer, I corrected. A lawyer who walked away, she said, tilting her head. Why? I hesitated. I hadn't told anyone the full story of why I'd left law. Not even Mr. Harrington. It's a long story, I said finally. I'd like to hear it, Elena replied. She pulled a business card from her purse and handed it to me. Over dinner, perhaps? Tomorrow night? I have a feeling we have a lot to talk about. I looked down at the elegant card. Elena Blackwood, Executive Director, Blackwood Investigative Unit. I don't know, I stammered, suddenly unsure. I'd spent so long hiding, the idea of stepping back into that world, a world of exposure, of consequences, terrified me. She must have seen the fear in my eyes. Sarah, she said gently, what you did tonight wasn't just brave. It was important. Reynolds has hurt countless people. But he's not alone. There are dozens like him out there, people who use their wealth and power to exploit others, who think they're above the law. And you want to expose them, I said, understanding dawning. With your help, she confirmed. Think about it. Someone with your legal background, your languages, your courage, we could make a real difference. The door to the restaurant banged open before I could respond. A man in a dark suit strode in, scanning the room until his eyes locked on me. "Sarah Chen," he called, walking toward us purposefully. Elena stepped in front of me protectively. "Who's asking?" He flashed a badge. "Special Agent David Jackson, Securities and Exchange Commission." "We need to talk, Ms. Chen." My heart sank. This was happening too fast. One moment of courage, and now everything was spiraling out of control. "About what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Victor Reynolds. And everything you know about his business practices." His eyes were serious, but not unkind. "What you said tonight, we've been building a case against Reynolds for months. You just gave us the break we needed. How did you get here so fast?" I asked. "One of Reynolds' investors called our tip line 20 minutes ago," he explained. "Said a lawyer posing as a waitress just exposed massive securities fraud in the middle of a 5-star restaurant. I was working late. The office is just 10 blocks from here." I glanced at Elena, who nodded encouragingly. "I don't know if I can help you," I said carefully. "The cases I worked on were sealed. There were NDAs. Which don't apply in federal investigations of criminal activity," Agent Jackson finished. "Ms. Chen, I understand you've been hiding for a reason. Whatever it is, I promise you'll be protected." Protected? The word echoed in my mind. I'd been protecting myself for so long by hiding, by becoming invisible. But had it really kept me safe? Or had it just kept me trapped? "People like Reynolds count on good people staying silent," Elena said quietly beside me. "They use fear as a weapon." I thought about Robert Jong, losing everything. About Patricia Rodriguez, forced out of her home. About all the others Reynolds had hurt, and all the others like him who were still out there, still hurting people, still getting away with it. I'd walked away once because the system felt too broken to fix. But maybe walking away hadn't been the answer. Maybe the answer was to stand and fight. "If I help you," I said slowly to Agent Jackson, "there's something you need to know first. About why I left law. About Westlake Pharmaceuticals." His eyebrows shot up in recognition of the name. "The drug safety scandal? That was you?" I nodded. "And there's more to that story than anyone knows." Before he could respond, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hello? Is this Sarah Chen?" A woman's voice, professional, urgent. "Yes, who's this?" "Rebecca Lewis, New York Times. We received a video of your confrontation with Victor Reynolds. We're running a story tomorrow, and I'd like to get your comment." I froze. A video? Of course someone had recorded it. In a room full of people with smartphones, it was inevitable. "Ms. Chen? Are you there?" I looked at Agent Jackson, then at Elena. Both were watching me intently, waiting to see what I would do. 8 months ago, I'd disappeared because I was afraid. I'd made myself invisible because it felt safer than being seen. But being invisible hadn't changed anything. Reynolds was still hurting people. Westlake Pharmaceuticals was still selling their dangerous drug. The corrupt and powerful were still winning. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Maybe it was time to be seen. "Yes," I said into the phone, my voice growing stronger with each word. "I'm here. And yes, I'd like to comment." I felt something shift inside me, a wall coming down, a door opening. "My name is Sarah Chen, and I have a story to tell. Please subscribe to this channel." The next morning exploded like a supernova. The video of my confrontation with Reynolds went viral, Waitress destroys Billionaire trending across every platform. My phone wouldn't stop ringing, reporters, lawyers, former colleagues. 8 hours of chaos after 8 months of invisibility. I sat in the SEC offices, surrounded by agents and attorneys, recounting everything I knew about Reynolds' operations. The evidence was mounting by the hour as more victims came forward, emboldened by what they'd seen. "Ms. Chen," Agent Jackson said, sliding a folder across the table. "We've been authorized to offer you witness protection." Reynolds has connections. Dangerous ones. I opened the folder. New identity. New location. New life. This is necessary. I asked, though I already knew the answer. Reynolds made 3 calls last night, he said grimly. 1 to his lawyer. 1 to his PR team. And 1 to a number we've linked to Anton Volkov. My blood went cold. Volkov. Russian oligarch with ties to organized crime. There's something else, Agent Jackson continued. When we started looking deeper into Reynolds, we found a connection we weren't expecting. He pushed another file toward me. To Westlake Pharmaceuticals. My hands trembled as I opened it. There, in black and white, Reynolds Capital Group had been Westlake's primary investor. The same company that buried evidence of deadly side effects. The same company whose whistleblower, my friend Maya, had died under suspicious circumstances. Reynolds wasn't just a client, I whispered, pieces falling into place. He was protecting his investment. And silencing anyone who threatened it, Jackson confirmed. Including Maya Chen. I looked up sharply. How did you? Your cousin, right? We reopened her case this morning. The room spun. Maya wasn't just a whistleblower, she was family. The cousin I'd grown up with. The reason I'd gone into law in the first place. Her suicide had never made sense. Now it did. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena, turn on CNN now. Jackson switched on the television mounted on the wall. Breaking news banner, Reynolds empire collapsing, stock down 60%, criminal investigation launched, board members resigning. My momentary victory evaporated as the reporter continued. Reynolds has released a statement denying all allegations and naming former attorney Sarah Chen as part of a coordinated attack on his company. He claims Chen fabricated evidence in previous cases and is working with business rivals to destroy him. He's painting you as the criminal, Jackson said. Can he do that? He has billions of dollars and media connections. He can do a lot of damage. My phone rang again. Elena. Sarah, Reynolds is scorching the earth. He's calling in favors from every media outlet he has influence over. You need to get ahead of this. How? He has resources I can't imagine. But he doesn't have the truth, she said. Or Blackwood Media. We're running our investigation as tomorrow's cover story, but we need you on camera tonight. People need to hear your voice, not his. The thought terrified me. I'm not a public person, Elena. I've spent months being invisible. And look where that got you. Look where it got Maya. Maya. My chest tightened. She'd been brave enough to speak out, and it had cost her everything. There's more, Elena continued. Remember I said we'd been investigating Reynolds? We weren't just looking at his financial crimes. What do you mean? Sarah, we found evidence linking him to 3 other suicides besides your cousin. All whistleblowers. All people who threatened his business. The room went silent. Agent Jackson exchanged glances with his colleagues. We're not just talking about fraud anymore, Elena said softly. We're talking about murder. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of what this meant. I wasn't just exposing a billionaire's financial crimes, I was potentially bringing down a killer. One who now had me in his sights. Ms. Chen, Jackson said, the protection offer stands. New identity, new beginning. You've given us enough to work with. You can walk away. Walk away. Hide again. Disappear. But Maya couldn't walk away. Neither could Reynolds' other victims. If I disappear, I said slowly, Reynolds wins. He scares another person into silence. The story becomes about me running, not about his crimes. I looked at the folder, then pushed it back across the table. I'm done hiding, I said, my decision made. I'll do the interview, Elena. Not just about the fraud, but everything, Westlake, Maya, all of it. You understand the risk? Jackson asked. I nodded. Better than most. As I left the building, my phone pinged with an email from an encrypted address. The subject line made my heart stop. I know what really happened to Maya Chen. The attachment was a single photo, Maya and Reynolds, together at a charity gala 3 years ago. Before she became a whistleblower. Before she died. They weren't just in the same photo, they were intimate. His arm around her waist, her smile tight and uncomfortable. The message read, "There's more where this came from. Meet me tonight. 8 p.m. Blue Harbor Marina. Slip 42. Come alone or this evidence disappears forever." This wasn't just about business anymore. This was personal. Reynolds hadn't just covered up corporate fraud, he had known Maya. Had he been involved in her death more directly than I'd imagined? I had to know the truth, no matter the risk. Blue Harbor Marina was deserted at night, just moonlight on black water and the gentle creak of boats against their moorings. Every instinct screamed this was a trap, but the possibility of learning the truth about Maya drove me forward. I texted Elena my location, ignored Jackson's calls, and come alone as instructed. Some truths are worth the risk. Slip 42 held a sleek yacht, its interior lights glowing. As I approached, a figure emerged from the shadows, tall, female, familiar. "Hello, Sarah." My blood froze. Diane Crawford. Reynolds' chief legal counsel. My former mentor at Morrison and Associates. Surprised. She smiled coldly. "You shouldn't be. Who do you think recommended you for the Westlake case?" The pieces clicked into horrible place. "You set me up." Reynolds needed someone to take the fall when the Westlake evidence disappeared. Someone brilliant but naive. Someone who would quit rather than fight when cornered. And Maya? My voice cracked. Was her death part of your plan too? Maya made choices, Diane said dismissively. She got entangled with Reynolds, learned things she shouldn't have, threatened the wrong people. She was murdered. Officially, she committed suicide. Just like you're about to. 2 men appeared behind me. One grabbed my arms while the other searched me for weapons or recording devices. The grieving cousin, overcome with guilt about Maya, jumps into the harbor, Diane continued. Poetic, don't you think? People know I'm here, I lied. No one who can help you in time. She checked her watch. The story about your fabricated evidence and mental instability is breaking in 15 minutes. By morning, no one will question why you killed yourself. My phone buzzed in the man's hand, Agent Jackson calling again. He showed Diane. Your sec friend is persistent, she sighed. Shame he'll be too late. As they dragged me toward the edge of the dock, I thought of Maya. Of all the times I'd stayed silent. Of all the people Reynolds had hurt. Reynolds won't win, I said, struggling against their grip. The truth is already out there. Truth. Diane laughed. Truth is what people with power say it is. A blinding light suddenly flooded the dock. A loudspeaker crackled, federal agents. Hands where we can see them. Chaos erupted. The men release me. Diane lunged for something in her jacket, a gun. Shots exploded through the night. I was thrown to the ground, someone's body covering mine protectively. When I looked up, Agent Jackson was there. You okay? He asked, helping me up. I nodded, dazed. Around us, agents were handcuffing Diane and her men. How did you? Elena called us, he explained. Said you'd gotten a suspicious message. We traced your phone. Diane confessed, I said urgently. About Reynolds, about Maya. We heard everything, Jackson assured me. It was all recorded. He nodded toward a van where technicians were monitoring equipment. We've been tapping Reynolds in a circle for weeks. Just needed someone to make them nervous enough to talk. You used me as bait, I realized. No, came Elena's voice as she rushed onto the dock. You used yourself. We just made sure you weren't alone. As medics checked me over, Jackson's phone rang. His expression darkened as he listened. Reynolds is gone, he said after hanging up. Private jet took off 30 minutes ago. We've alerted Interpol, but... He's running, I finished. And he has resources everywhere. We'll find him, Jackson promised. But it might take time. Later, sitting wrapped in a blanket in the back of an SUV, I watched as agents led Diane into a vehicle. She caught my eye and mouthed something, "You're still dead." Elena squeezed my hand. "You're not safe here anymore." "I know," I whispered. Everything I'd built, everything I'd fought for, all of it now hanging by a thread. Reynolds was gone but not defeated. His reach was global. His vengeance would be relentless. And I was more exposed than ever. "What happens now?" I asked. Jackson handed me a folder, the same witness protection offer from earlier. "Now you disappear," he said. "Until we can guarantee your safety." I stared at the folder, at the promise of another vanishing act. Another life in hiding. "Running didn't protect Maya," I said quietly. "And it won't stop Reynolds." "Then what will?" Elena asked. I looked out at the harbor, at the city lights reflecting on dark water. The answer came with perfect clarity. "The one thing he can't fight," I said. "Complete exposure." "Good evening. I'm Sarah Chen." The camera's red light blinked at me as I sat in Blackwood Media's studio, my hand steady despite the gravity of what I was about to do. Across the globe, Reynolds was watching, I was certain of it. 3 days ago, I was a waitress at the Golden Terrace. Today, I'm here to tell you about Victor Reynolds, not just his financial crimes, but the lives he's destroyed. Including my cousin Maya's. For 30 minutes, I laid it all bare, the Westlake pharmaceutical cover-up, Maya's relationship with Reynolds, the evidence of her murder disguised as suicide, the pattern of whistleblowers dying, the offshore accounts, everything. Elena's team had assembled documentation supporting every claim, financial records, emails, testimonies from other victims who'd come forward after seeing my confrontation with Reynolds. Reynolds thinks his money makes him untouchable, I concluded. But the truth is, he's just a coward hiding behind wealth and influence. And cowards can be found. Within hours, the interview had 10 million views. #Find Reynolds trended worldwide. "It's working," Elena said, showing me her tablet. 3 of Reynolds' board members have come forward with new evidence. His accounts are being frozen across jurisdictions. Interpol has elevated his status. Agent Jackson arrived with more news. We've arrested for more members of Reynolds' inner circle. They're turning on each other, cutting deals. "And Reynolds?" I asked. Still in the wind, but running out of places to hide. His passport was flagged in Switzerland 6 hours ago. He's moving east. My phone rang, an encrypted call from Diane's lawyer. "Ms. Chen, my client wishes to cooperate fully in exchange for considerations. She has information about Mr. Reynolds' contingency plans. Information you specifically need to hear." An hour later, I sat across from Diane in a federal holding facility. "You've caused quite the storm, Sarah," she said, shadows under her eyes. "Reynolds is furious." "Where is he?" "Heading to his compound in the UAE. "But that's not why I called you." She leaned forward. "He has a dead man switch. Digital files set to release if he's captured or killed. Files that implicate people who weren't involved, people whose lives would be destroyed. Including your parents." My blood went cold. "My parents?" "Fabricated evidence linking your father to money laundering through his restaurant. Your mother to insurance fraud related to her cancer treatments. Reynolds is thorough." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because this has gone too far." For the first time, I saw regret in her eyes. Maya was never supposed to die. That wasn't the plan. What was the plan, Diane? Just to scare her. To discredit her. Reynolds took matters into his own hands. I stood to leave, disgusted. "Sarah," she called after me. "The switch is controlled through his private server. The access point is in his New York penthouse. There's a safe room, the controls are there." Outside, I relayed everything to Jackson and Elena. "It's a trap," Jackson said immediately. "Probably," I agreed. "But what if it's not? My parents, other innocent people, we can't take that risk." "Even if it's true, his penthouse will be guarded," Elena argued. "Not if everyone thinks he's overseas," I countered. "Not if we can create a diversion. A plan formed between us, dangerous, possibly foolish, but our best chance. If we do this, Jackson said, we do it by the book. No lone wolf heroics. I thought of Maya, of how alone she must have felt in her final moments. No one does this alone, I agreed. Not anymore. 24 hours later, as FBI teams prepared to breach Reynolds' penthouse, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. A photo of my parents at their small suburban home, followed by 5 words, "You should have stayed invisible." My heart stopped. Then another message appeared. "But I'm glad you didn't. This is Robert Jong. I'm with your parents. They're safe. We all are. And we're ready to stand with you." I showed Jackson and Elena the messages, tears in my eyes. "You're not alone anymore, Sarah," Elena said softly. "And neither is Reynolds," Jackson added, checking his tactical gear. "Ready?" I nodded, no longer afraid. "Let's end this." Reynolds' penthouse gleamed with obscene luxury, marble floors, priceless art, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city he'd exploited for years. Our operation moved with precision, FBI cyber teams working to locate the server, tactical units securing each room, Elena documenting everything for the world to see. I moved alongside Agent Jackson toward the master suite where the safe room was reportedly hidden. "Clear so far," he whispered. "Too clear." He was right, the absence of resistance felt wrong. Reynolds' security team should have been here. The master bedroom door swung open at Jackson's touch. Inside, opulence gave way to something else, dozens of monitors covering one wall, each displaying surveillance feeds of people. I recognized Robert Jong, Patricia Rodriguez, my parents, other whistleblowers, all with timestamps from the past 24 hours. "He's been watching them," I breathed. "All of them." "Hello, Sarah." The voice came from behind us. Victor Reynolds sat in a high-backed chair in the shadows, a glass of whiskey in his hand, a gun on the table beside him. "You really thought I'd leave the country?" He chuckled. "Amateur mistake." "It's over, Reynolds," Jackson said, weapon raised. "Freeze." "FBI." Reynolds sighed, oddly calm. "Do you know the difference between people like me and people like you, Sarah? I own things. People, politicians, judges. You're just borrowing your moment of fame." "You don't own anything anymore," I replied. "Your accounts are frozen. Your allies are turning on you. The world knows who you really are. Yet here I sit, in my home, drinking my whiskey." He gestured around him. "The wealthy don't play by your rules. Federal agents have you surrounded," Jackson warned. Reynolds smiled. "But will they find everything in time?" He pulled out a phone. One press of this button, and files released to every major news outlet, files destroying hundreds of lives, including your parents. I stepped forward. "Maya trusted you. She loved you. And you killed her." Something flickered in his eyes, pain, perhaps, or merely annoyance at the mention of her name. "Maya was a complication," he said flatly. "She was my family." My voice broke. "She believed in justice, in doing what's right. She believed in you." "Sentiment," he scoffed. "The weakness that brings down empires." Behind Reynolds, I noticed a shadow move, Elena, who'd slipped in through a hidden door, her phone recording everything, a security expert beside her working on the server access. "You know what your real mistake was, Victor?" I asked, keeping his attention. "Not underestimating me. Not even killing Maya. Your mistake was believing that fear lasts forever." His finger hovered over the phone. "Are you willing to test that theory?" The security expert gave Elena a subtle nod. They'd gained access. "I already have," I said. "Look around you. Your empire lasted exactly as long as people were afraid. But fear has an expiration date." Reynolds' phone suddenly went dark in his hand. Then every monitor on the wall flickered and died. "What?" His composure cracked. "Servers down," Elena announced, stepping forward. "Dead man switch disabled. Files secured and being analyzed by the FBI Cyber Division." Reynolds lunged for the gun on the table. Jackson was faster, tackling him to the ground. As agents swarmed the room, I walked to the window overlooking the city. Somewhere out there were all the people Reynolds had hurt, all the lives he'd damaged. Maya would never see him brought to justice, but I would. For both of us. Ms. Chen, an agent called, we found this in the safe. He handed me a small flash drive labeled MC, Maya Chen. Her original evidence, I whispered, closing my fingers around it. She never gave up. Later, as Reynolds was led away in handcuffs, he paused beside me. This changes nothing, he hissed. People like me always find a way back. I met his gaze steadily. Not this time. This time, the invisible people won. 3 months later, I stood on the steps of the federal courthouse as the verdict was announced, guilty on all counts, securities fraud, wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and first-degree murder in the death of Maya Chen. Victor Reynolds, the untouchable billionaire, sentenced to life without parole. Robert Jong was there, along with Patricia Rodriguez and dozens of Reynolds' other victims. My parents stood proudly beside me. And Elena waited with a contract, a position heading Blackwood Media's new corporate accountability division. Ready to make some more powerful people uncomfortable, she asked with a smile. I thought of Maya, of the night at the Golden Terrace, of all the moments I'd stayed silent before finding my voice. More than ready, I answered. This is just the beginning. Sometimes our greatest strength comes from standing up for others when no one else will. Hit that subscribe button now. 1 year after the verdict, I stood at Maya's grave with fresh flowers, white lilies, her favorite. The autumn leaves danced around me as I traced her name on the headstone, now adorned with a new inscription, Truth Teller, Brave Heart, Justice Seeker. We did it, Maya, I whispered. Reynolds' entire network is being dismantled. Westlake Pharmaceuticals has been forced to recall that drug and compensate victims. Your research is saving lives. The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, and I like to think it was her way of answering. Life had transformed in ways I never imagined. The Sarah Chen who had hidden in a waitress uniform no longer existed. In her place stood someone new, someone who had stopped running and started rebuilding. The Blackwood Corporate Accountability Division had grown from a small team to an internationally recognized investigative powerhouse. We'd exposed 3 major financial frauds, 2 pharmaceutical cover-ups, and a human trafficking ring disguised as a luxury resort chain. Our investigations had recovered billions for victims and put 17 corporate executives behind bars. My parents had moved from their small suburban home to an apartment closer to the city, close enough to have dinner with me every Sunday, but far enough to maintain their peaceful retirement. My father still insisted on cooking, claiming my success hadn't improved my skills in the kitchen. He wasn't wrong. Robert Jong had used his settlement money to start a foundation helping families affected by corporate fraud. Patricia Rodriguez now worked with us as a community liaison, connecting victims with resources and support. James from the Golden Terrace had finally landed his Broadway role, though he still joked that no performance would ever match the night Sarah Chen destroyed a billionaire with words. And Mr. Harrington? He'd retired and sold the Golden Terrace to its staff as a worker-owned cooperative. I still stopped by occasionally, though now I sat at the tables instead of serving them. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena, CNN interview in 1 hour. Car's on its way. You ready? Elena. The unexpected constant through all of this. What had started as professional respect had blossomed into something deeper, something I hadn't been looking for but somehow found anyway. Her fearlessness, her integrity, her unwavering belief in truth, all of it had drawn me to her in ways I hadn't anticipated. Almost ready, I texted back, adding a heart emoji that still felt new and wonderful. Our relationship had developed slowly, cautiously. Both of us carried scars from our pasts. Both of us had built walls to protect ourselves. But night by night, conversation by conversation, those walls had come down. 3 months ago, on the anniversary of the night at the Golden Terrace, she'd taken me to dinner at the restaurant where we now sat at the center table, not to be seen, but because we no longer feared being visible. To finding your voice, she'd toasted. And to someone worth speaking to, I'd replied. Later that night, on her apartment balcony overlooking the city lights, she'd kissed me for the first time, tentative at first, then with a certainty that took my breath away. I've been wanting to do that since I watched you stand up to Reynolds, she'd confessed. You have unusual taste in romantic moments, I'd laughed. I have excellent taste in brave women, she'd corrected. Now, standing at Maya's grave, I placed the lilies against the stone and stepped back. I'm going on national television today to talk about the Accountability Act, I told Maya. The bill you dreamed of, corporate transparency, whistleblower protections, executive accountability. It's going to pass, Maya. Your name will be in the first line. I felt a presence behind me and turned to see Elena walking up the cemetery path, her red hair catching the autumn light. She'd come to support me, as always. Talking to Maya, she asked gently, taking my hand. I nodded, telling her about the bill. She'd be so proud of you, Sarah. Elena squeezed my hand. We all are. We stood there in comfortable silence, the leaves crunching beneath our feet, the weight of the past year settling around us like a familiar coat, heavy at times, but necessary, protective. Are you nervous about the interview? Elena asked as we walked back toward the cemetery gates. A little, I admitted. A year ago, I was hiding in plain sight. Now I'm advocating legislation on national television. And changing the world in the process. Elena smiled. Just like you always wanted to. Not alone, I reminded her, returning the smile. Never alone anymore. The car was waiting at the curb, sleek and professional. As we slid into the back seat, my phone buzzed with notifications, messages of support from Jong, Rodriguez, my parents, former colleagues, even Agent Jackson, who had become an unlikely friend. Sarah, Elena said as the car pulled away, there's something I've been meaning to ask you. She seemed uncharacteristically nervous, which made my heart beat faster. What is it? Blackwood Media is opening an international bureau in London next month. I've been asked to head it up. She took a deep breath. I'd like you to come with me. Not just professionally, but personally. I want us to build something together, Sarah. Something lasting. I looked at this extraordinary woman, this partner in justice, in truth, in healing, and felt the last pieces of my old fear falling away. London, I said, testing the word. New city, new challenges, same mission. Is that a yes? Her eyes were hopeful, vulnerable. I leaned forward and kissed her softly. That's a definite yes. The car wound through the city streets toward the television studio, the skyline opening before us like a promise. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, from invisibility to advocacy, from silence to voice, from isolation to connection. You know what still amazes me? I said, gazing out the window. How one moment of courage can change everything. One decision to stop hiding, to stand up, to speak truth. One drop of water, Elena said with a smile. Exactly. I laughed, remembering how it all began. One drop of water that started a flood. As the studio came into view, its glass facade reflecting the afternoon sun, I felt ready in a way I'd never been before. Ready to speak not just for myself, not just for Maya, but for all those still finding their voices. My journey from invisible to invincible hadn't been easy. It had cost me my safety, challenged my courage, and forced me to confront my deepest fears. But it had also brought me purpose, love, and a truth more powerful than any lie, that our voices matter, that justice is possible, and that no one, no matter how wealthy or powerful, is beyond accountability. The car stopped. Elena gave my hand one last squeeze. Ready to change the world again, she asked. I nodded, no longer afraid of being seen, of being heard, of being known. Always. Family, that's my story, from waitress to whistleblower, from hiding to fighting, from silence to speaking truth to power. We all have moments when we must choose between what's easy and what's right. I chose to stop being invisible, and it changed everything. What about you? What truth are you waiting to speak? What stand are you ready to take? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey has touched you in any way, please subscribe to join our community of truth-tellers and change-makers. Because sometimes, all it takes is one voice, your voice, to start a revolution. Until next time, this is Sarah Chen, reminding you that you are never as invisible as you feel, and your voice is never as small as they want you to believe.